So great to have Spirit rising back. Yeah. So there was a woman driving long distance on a road trip, and she was getting kind of bored with just herself. And so she saw a woman hitchhiker on the side of the road and decided to pick up this woman. She looked harmless enough. She got into the car, and they started small talking, and the woman kept looking at the bag that was sitting between the seats, and the driver said, "Oh, you're wondering what's in the bag. It's a bottle of wine. I got it from my husband." And the hitchhiker woman looks at it and just nods and says, "Good trade." Wouldn't trade you for a bottle of wine, honey. Not even a case of wine. But I share that. I share that because grace can feel like a good trade. When we have grace, it feels like, wow, we traded up, we leveled up. Yesterday, I went for a run around Sloan's Lake, and Saturdays are usually pretty busy on the lake. But there were a lot more people than normal, and I was getting annoyed because they were getting in my way. And then I started looking around and looking at their t-shirts, and a lot of them had matching t-shirts, and they were running for brain tumor research, and they were running for breast cancer, and some of them said in honor of, or, in memory of, and my heart just swelled open. As I'm running, I start crying. How hard it is to cry and run at the same time. But I traded my annoyance for grace. I felt grace in that moment. I felt this immediate sense of just overwhelming love in that moment. And that's what grace can do for us if we're open to it. If we're open to looking at what's on the t-shirt instead of where are all these people coming from. But I share that because we're beginning our small group fall program today. And we're using this book, Grace Trail, by Anne Barry Jolas, called Grace Trail. It's a simple book. It's really easy to read. I hope you all get a copy of it. We're going to be studying it for the next 7 weeks. It's an easy book to read, but it's not an easy practice to follow. To be constantly turning your mind towards that grace, that love that is within each one of us. It's not easy. And so Grace Trail is, and we'll get more into this next week, is a process by which we allow ourselves to shift our thinking. Shift our thinking by looking at where we're grateful, what we need to release, what we need to accept, where we're challenged, what we need to embrace. The acronyms for grace. It's a great little book, and I hope that many of you will join us in this study as we look at it. Our author talks about this in the preface, that she felt like her light was going out. I'm sure many of us have felt like our light is going out. She had teenagers, both of her parents were dying, and she was changing professions all at the same time. It's a lot to handle. Even one of those is a lot to handle. But she found herself asking these grace questions that she had come up with earlier. And as she asked those questions, she felt a flicker of light in her start to spark. Just a flicker. And that's all it takes. It's just a crack of that light to open us up. It's not easy when we're challenged to say, what am I grateful for? It's not easy when we're clinging to control to say, what do I need to release? It's not easy to do that, but it can shift our perspectives, and we can crack open and open our hearts to see the grace that's there, to feel the grace that's there. She talks about how life is precious and grace matters. It does matter. We have to ask the right questions, though. Instead of when something challenges happens to us, and life will always give us something challenging, instead of asking, why is this happening, ask, how can I show up with this? How do I want to be with this? She says, life is short, and it is. And in that moment, hope matters. Hope matters. I have a neighbor who said that just this week, on Thursday, he said that somebody I wouldn't have expected, that he had hope for the future. It was just a little statement that just lightened the conversation, just lightened it up. That bright light that propels us forward is hope. She also says that life is tough and resiliency matters, because with resiliency, we don't keep repeating the same challenges over and over. We learn from our life so that we can move forward. It takes courage when we're afraid. And she created this word, skirtageous. Skirtageous. It's not an easy word to say, but it's being courageous even when we're scared. Because admit it, we do in life get scared. We get bogged down. We have challenges with life, with our family, with our jobs, with our responsibilities. And if we look at it from just a human perspective, it's hard to fathom that grace is there, that love is there and available to us. It's hard to see it because we're all wrapped up in our thoughts, in our human thoughts. We have a short fuse, and we have a scarcity mentality most of the time. There's not enough. But when it comes to grace, there's plenty. There's plenty. Plenty to go around. But we usually block it in our consciousness. We don't allow its presence to be felt because we're blocking it with negative thinking. We're blocking it by judging by appearances. We're blocking it by insisting on even exchanges. We're blocking it by thinking of all the things that we have to do, and woe is me because I have to do it all by myself. And there's not enough. Richard Rohr says this in one of his blogs from 2017. The flow of grace through us is largely blocked when we are living inside a worldview of scarcity, a feeling that there's just not enough. Enough of God, enough of me, enough food, enough health care to go around, enough mercy to include and forgive all faults. The human mind cannot imagine an infinite love or a God whose love is everlasting. The human mind can't do that. But guess what? We're not just human. We're fully human, fully divine beings, and in our divinity, we can fathom it. We can experience it. We can allow it into our lives. It's that paradox of being fully human, fully divine. And in Unity, we teach the divine paradoxes, which one of them is that God or spirit or whatever you want to call it, the universe, is both law and grace. It's hard to hold a paradox in our human minds. But the law in Unity is the law of cause and effect. That everything comes down to the law of cause and effect. What you sow, you reap. And many of us see this played out in our lives over and over and over. What you give is what you get. It's a law. It happens. We see it in our lives all the time. But there's a higher aspect of the law. Remember, Jesus said he didn't come to break the laws, but to fulfill them. And so the higher aspect of the law is grace. That yes, what we sow is what we reap, but we always reap more than we sow. And thank goodness our consciousness and all those negative thoughts don't give us a totally negative result. That is never quite as bad as we think it might be. We need to trade in our fear, trade in our resentment, trade in our need for an even exchange, which we want in our humanness. We want an even exchange, this for that. Trade it in for grace. Allow yourself to let go of that for grace. Because grace is always there, always there. Eric Butterworth says this about grace. Grace explains the inadequacy of the idea of karma, the endless cycle of cause and effect. It is true that as you sow, so do you reap. Yet God's desire to express completely through you and as you is so great that you never completely reap the harvest of error, and you always reap more good than you sow. This is grace. This is grace. And grace is there in abundance for us when we allow ourselves. One of the best parables in the Gospels about grace is the parable of the tenants, or the parable of the laborers. It's found in Matthew chapter 20. And in this parable, there's a landowner who finds some laborers at the beginning of the day, tells them to go to his vineyard and work, and they agree upon the daily wage. Throughout the day, he keeps going and seeing more laborers and sending them also to his vineyard to go work the vineyard, not agreeing to a price, just saying, well, we'll give you a fair wage. At 5 o'clock, he finds some more laborers standing around in a parking lot and says, what are you doing here? And they said, nobody has hired us. He goes, I'll hire you. Go to my vineyard. And they go to the vineyard and work for an hour. At 6 o'clock, the landowner says to his bookkeeper, accountant, whatever, who pays the people, says, I want you to pay the laborers, starting with the last ones that came in and finish with the first. And so he starts paying them, and the last ones who were there 1 hour got a full day's wage. And then the ones that came throughout the day at different times got a full day's wage. And then the ones that came at the first time in the morning got a full day wage. And they realized that, hey, we should have been getting more. We were here more time than those people that were here 1 hour. Why are we getting what they got? See, that's the human mind. Even exchange. We should get the same for the same amount of time, but it wasn't the same amount of time. So in Unity, we like to look at these stories metaphysically. What do they mean in our lives now? How is this relevant to my life now? Well, it is. It is, because this has to do with how we work in our consciousness and get our results. So think of the landlord as the law. The landlord, the owner of the vineyard, is the law. The vineyard is our consciousness and our life. Our consciousness creates our life. And the laborers or the tenants are aspects of us, not different people, but all us, different aspects of us. They represent our thoughts, our beliefs, our emotions. And we work in the vineyard to produce results. We work in consciousness to produce results. The wages are the results of our work, the fruits of our labor, the fruits of the vineyard, the fruits of the consciousness. So there's different levels on how we get results. The first group started early in the morning, had a set upon wage agreed upon. At the end of the day, got their wage for the full day. This is where most of us live most of the time. We make an agreement. We decide we're going to do this work, and we get paid for this work that we do. You can think of it not necessarily as work, but any kind of result. When I wanted to become a ordained Unity minister, my soul's agreement was, I'm going to do the work. I'm going to take the classes. I'm going to go to Unity Village. I'm going to do the intensives. I'm going to do the work here. And at the end of my time, at the end of those years, I got the ordination. There's nothing wrong with that way of thinking and that way of getting results. The next group, those that went throughout the day, think of it this way. They didn't set a wage that they were going to get. They more or less said, this or something better. We may have something in mind, but we say this or something better. Let it unfold how it will, however it will. Spirit knows better than I do what is for my highest good. We see this played out in our lives. When my husband Kevin and I moved to Denver, we had a list of things that we wanted, but we put at the bottom, this or something better. And as soon as we released the requirement of all those items, we found the house. And the grace of that house, of finding that particular house in that particular neighborhood, the grace of it was that we have a group of neighbors that we love to hang out with. We didn't expect that at all. That was a total gift. We didn't know that would happen. And so we all get results in that way too, by just letting it unfold. Let's see how this unfolds. I'll do what I need to do, but I know I don't have a specific result in mind. And the third way is I just want to serve. The laborers that were there that last hour just didn't want to be idle. They just wanted to serve. And we see this in our lives too. There's no agreement to what we're going to do. There's just a desire to serve from the heart. And we are graced beyond measure when we serve. We are graced when we can just have that little switch, that little shift in our thinking, like I did with the running, like I did with, oh, these people are walking for a cause. I traded in that annoyance for the grace, and I felt this overwhelming love. We too can feel this overwhelming sense of love, this overwhelming sense of oneness when we give without any expectation, when we give in service. And probably many of us have found things have come to us out of the blue, it feels like. That's grace. That's grace. But it's not reasonable to the ego. The ego doesn't get this at all. The ego does not get grace. It does not get that love is available to everybody, that grace is available to everybody in equal measure. It doesn't like that. It looks at, hey, like those early laborers, the ones that started early in the day, what? I should get more because I was here longer. Grace doesn't work that way. It's not an even exchange. It's a gift. This week, I was already planning on using this parable, and Megan Watterson, who I follow, she wrote Mary Magdalene Revealed. She talked about this parable too, and she talked about it as love, that this treasure is love rather than grace. They're interchangeable. Love, grace, kingdom of heaven, all the same thing. And she said it's for anyone who shows up. The mind doesn't get that. It's for anyone who shows up. Doesn't matter what time you show up. Doesn't matter if you show up at the end of your life and say, here I am, I'm ready. It doesn't matter. Love is available to everyone in the same amount. But it's unreasonable to think that way in our humanness. We think we have to earn it. We think we have to prove ourselves, and we don't. Not to be loved, not to experience grace. It's there for us, always. We just have to shift our thinking so we're not blocking it. She talked about how the first and the last, in the Greek alphabet, alpha is the first and omega is the last letter. And they're far apart if it's linear. In our humanness, we want things linear. But if it's a circle, the first and the last are right next to each other. Right next to each other. It's hard for our human minds to comprehend, but our souls get this. Our fully divine selves get this. But we can't crack the code. The author of the book Anne was saying that, I think there's a grace code that we have to crack. It's a mystery. We don't know how it works. We don't know why it works, but it works. There are no code crackers here. It's our human minds can't comprehend it. It's a secret only to be experienced. When we experience it, then we realize that it's there. Before that, just in our humanness, it's useless to us. Like Jesus said, the vine that is cut off, the branch that is cut off the vine is useless. It needs to stay on the vine, on the I am, on the divine self. Richard Rohr went on to say in this same blog, a saint only knows that there is more than enough for our need, but never enough for our greed. Only our personal experiences of unconditional, unearned, and infinite love and forgiveness can move us from the normal worldview of scarcity to the divine world of infinite abundance. Once we experience just a smidge of that grace, we become more aware of it in our lives. We're more open to seeing it. We're more open to experiencing it. And it's there in abundance. You know, I love how it says in the Bible somewhere, I've heard this phrase, by grace you've been saved. Saved from what? By grace you've been saved. We're saved from our guilt. We're saved from our resentment. We're saved from our fear. We're saved from our need to control. We're saved by grace, by love, by coming from that divine part of ourselves instead of the human part of ourselves. When we're open to it, it's there. We can trade in that guilt, trade in that resentment. It's a good trade. Get the grace. It's a good trade. It's better than a bottle of wine. When we shift our thinking from worldly views that encourage us to keep everything to ourselves, look only to ourselves. What can we get? What do I get? And we see how separate we are. We see how divided we are, instead of seeing the oneness that grace allows us to see. The oneness, the fullness, the wholeness that's always there for us. It doesn't mean somebody else won't get it when we get it. It means everyone else can get it as much as we get it, in full measure. And it's unreasonable to our humanness. It's unreasonable. This isn't fair. But it's up to us to allow it. Allow that grace to come in. Are you aware of grace in your life? It's all around us, but we have to allow our minds to see it, allow our hearts, open our hearts to it. Are you open to experiencing that? It requires you to shift your thinking just a little bit. Just a little bit is all it takes, just a crack to let the light in. Open your heart and mind. Do it this week. Get the book if you haven't gotten the book. We have them in the bookstore. Get it online. We have a grace trail that the staff has put out in our yard. Do you want to do tours today? I'm going to talk about this more next week. But Anne is available to show you where the grace trails. We'll have a map next week, I hope. Somebody can draw a nice map. I don't know. Not me. Somebody else. If anybody volunteers, let me know. But we have, where's the picture of the stones? So Anne did the stones and painted them, and we have these spread out throughout the yard, and you can take your own grace trail. We have little stones that the kids painted. That when you feel so called at one of these bigger stones, if you're standing in front of the gratitude stone and you say, what am I grateful for? And we'll get more into this as we go along, but what am I grateful for? If you feel called to hold a stone that one of the kids painted, to pick one up. There are baskets of little stones, painted little stones at each one of the stations. This is a community-wide practice. So it's available to you. You don't even have to walk. You can do it all in your head. Do it in your consciousness. Think about it. When Kevin and I go for a walk, one of us will say, let's say grace. And we go through the grace steps. It's been a great practice for the two of us. Watch the TED Talk. There's a TED Talk of our author talking about how she got the idea for this book. It's called Cracking the Grace Code. I'll put it in the update on Thursday so you can click on it. But make a good trade. Make a good trade. Choose love over fear. That's our theme this year. Choose love over fear and trade up from whatever human experience you're challenged with right now to grace. To grace. Anne Barry Jolas says, grace is a gift from the universe or God. It is a gracious and active communication of a gift that is free of any claim or judgment about you being worthy enough or needing to pay it back. You can't buy it or make it happen, but you can experiencing it. You can experience it by living your life with curiosity, compassion, and courage. So you're invited to live your life with curiosity, compassion, and courage, even skirtageousness, whatever that word is. Try it. Try it. You'll like it. Trade up to grace. Namaste.